Okay, so the verse I want to sit with today is one people usually use to close a deal. Say this out loud, believe it in your heart, you're in. And sure, it says that. But if you read it in the room it was written for, the two sentences were not the end of a conversation. Those sentences could get you killed. Romans chapter 10, verses 9 and 10. Paul, writing to a house church in Rome, somewhere around the year 57. And what he hands them is not a formula. It is closer to a loyalty oath. The line in English: if you confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. For with the heart one believes and is justified, and with the mouth one confesses and is saved. Read it once, plainly. It sounds like a tidy sentence. It is not a tidy sentence. The word Paul uses for confess, homologeō, is not the word for private agreement. It is a legal word. In Greek courts, it named the sworn declaration that bound you to an oath. In the Roman world of the 40s and 50s, it was the verb for the civic loyalty oath. The thing you said about Caesar at public ceremonies, in business contracts, at imperial festivals. Kyrios Kaisar. Caesar is Lord. That was the sentence the empire built itself on. And you said it, publicly, in rooms where it was recorded. Paul takes the exact syntactic shape of that sentence and swaps the object. Kyrios Iēsous. Jesus is Lord. Same construction. Same weight. One different noun. And everyone in the house church that night knew what he had just done. 60 years later, a Roman governor named Pliny is writing to the Emperor Trajan and telling him how he screened suspected Christians. He asks them to say Kyrios Kaisar. If they will not, they die. The test is literally the inversion of Paul's line. This is the line. Everything else in the verse is set up for this.
Now, there is more. There is a grammar thing that does real work too. In verse 9, Paul uses two aorist verbs. Think of aorist as a camera shutter. One click, a moment, done. You crossed the threshold. You said the words. But then, in verse 10, he shifts tense. Present passives. A camera that stays open, ongoing, continuous, being believed, being confessed. Paul is distinguishing the door you walked through from the room you now live in. And the receipt reading of this verse, the one that treats the prayer as the whole thing, only works if you stop at verse 9. Verse 10 will not let you stop. Okay, I want to stay with the architecture for a second, because this is where the whole thing opened up for me. Romans 9 through 11 is a 3-chapter argument about what happened to Israel. Chapter 9, God's election. Chapter 11, God's ongoing purpose for the Jewish people. And chapter 10, the middle panel, is the human responsibility piece. Why did the gospel land with Gentiles and not with most of historic Israel? And inside chapter 10, right at the structural center, these two verses. Load-bearing is a real term here. Remove verses 9 and 10,
and the chapter cannot make its argument. Paul is claiming that the righteousness Israel stumbled over is accessible on identical terms to every human mouth and every human heart. It is the hinge. It is the place the whole letter is poured through and comes out the other side. And the thing I missed until I started reading it structurally, verses 9 and 10 are not just a center point, they are a substitution. 3 verses earlier, in 10:6 through 8, Paul quotes Moses, specifically Deuteronomy chapter 3, which is Moses' covenant threshold speech, the moment before Israel crosses the Jordan into the promised land.
Moses says, "The commandment I am giving you is not too hard for you. It is not in heaven that you have to go up and get it. It is not across the sea. The word is very near you. It is in your mouth and in your heart." Mouth and heart. That exact pairing. Paul lifts Moses' sentence and substitutes Christ for the commandment. Who will ascend to heaven becomes to bring Christ down. Who will descend becomes to bring Christ up from the dead. And the word is near you, in your mouth and in your heart, becomes the confession of the raised Lord. So when Paul writes verses 9 and 10, he is not improvising. He is staging a covenant initiation rite. A Jewish believer in that Roman house church, hearing this read out loud, this is Moses' language at the threshold, being redirected to a crucified Galilean. And then the second thing happens. Because a chapter before the one Paul quotes, Moses had already admitted something. Deuteronomy 29, verse 4. To this day, the Lord has not given you a heart to understand. So Moses' insistence that the word was near, it was already an admission that God himself would have to be the one to close the distance. Paul is saying he has. The ascending and descending Moses told Israel they did not have to do, God himself did. Came down, was raised up. The nearness was always the point. Moses just did not know what the nearness would cost. That is the structural move. Tuesday morning, I was at my desk, and I thought I was going to write about something else entirely. I had notes out, I had the passage open, and the thing I kept circling, I could not get past how much weight this tiny phrase was carrying. Mouth and heart. Moses said it at a threshold. Paul says it at a threshold. Everybody in that house church knew the echo. By Thursday, I knew where the passage was cutting, and it was not where I expected.
It is not the thing where a stranger walks into a service and gets asked if they want to pray a prayer. That scene is fine, it is just not what this passage is doing. What the passage is doing is quieter, and it is aimed at people who are already inside. It looks like a man in his 40s at his desk on a Tuesday evening, laptop open, saying the words, "Jesus is Lord," with complete sincerity. And also, having just spent 90 minutes redrafting an email because he is terrified of what his boss will think. Those are not two separate moments. That is one moment. And the confession has not yet landed where the email is being drafted. It is not loud. It is not a crisis. It is the part of your life that runs on a different Lord, and you have never said the second Lord's name out loud because you did not know you were required to. Paul's grammar will not let you keep them separate. With the heart, it is believed. With the mouth, it is confessed. One movement. Pei and lev. Hebrew anthropology does not split them. You cannot have one without the other and still call it what Paul calls it. Second picture. It is Sunday afternoon, and you are standing in the doorway of your son's bedroom, and he has just asked you a real question about something you have been avoiding for 6 months. The carpet is the one you have had since he was 7. The light coming through the blinds is the late afternoon kind. And the thing you say next is the confession.
or it is not. Not the church confession, the actual one. The one where Christ has the last word in the room, instead of your comfort, or your reputation as a reasonable parent, or the version of yourself you've been protecting.
Because the loyalty oath reading forces something specific. If Kyrios Iēsous is a real sentence, every other Kyrios gets deposed in the saying. Not in theory, by name. Your career, your political tribe, the opinion of that one person whose approval has been quietly running things, your retirement account, the image of your family you have been curating for 7 years. You do not have to list all of them. You have to name the one that has been issuing verdicts lately. Because that is what a lord is, not a title. The authority whose word you cannot override. The one who gets the deciding vote when it costs something. Paul's move here, and I mean move in the best way, is that he makes the conditions so small that no one can claim they could not meet them. A mouth, a heart, every human has both. 2,000 years of Jewish identity markers, circumcision, kosher, Sabbath, the calendar, none of them appear in the sentence. And that is the wound he is addressing for the Jewish believers in that room. Because those markers were not arbitrary. They were the shape of their people for 2 millennia. And Paul is saying the markers were never the thing that bore the weight. A Gentile can do this in 30 seconds. A scholar who has spent 40 years inside the text does it on the same terms. I do not think that is painless good news. Not for the Jewish reader in AD 57. Not for the modern Christian who has built their identity on a doctrinal framework, or a denominational lineage, or a political alignment. Paul is demolishing every additional admission requirement. And if you have quietly bolted one on, if there is a credential you have been using, internally or out loud, to certify who is really in, this passage is aimed at you.
Which I think is the piece the sinner's prayer reading has lost. The verse is not evangelism for outsiders. It is demolition for insiders. Paul is not inviting the Roman church in. He is telling them to stop adding conditions at the door. And then the resurrection piece. Because Paul does not say, believe Jesus is alive. He says very specifically, believe that God raised him. Active verb, the Father as subject, which makes the content of belief a divine verdict. The Father sided with the condemned man against the establishment that engineered his death. God's verdict ran opposite to the visible verdict. To believe the resurrection, in Paul's sense, is to accept that the executed man was right and the people who killed him were wrong. And then to carry that reversal into every situation this week where the visible verdict and the divine verdict are pointing in opposite directions. Who is winning in that room? Who is being dismissed? Who you are treating as credible? So the piece I am carrying out of this passage, I will hand it over the way it has been landing. If Kyrios Iēsous is a sentence with real weight, if it is the loyalty oath Paul's Greek says it is, then the question is not whether you said it. The question is which lord got deposed when you did. And if you cannot name one, the sentence has not landed yet. Who had the deciding vote?